Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Steve, 25, a bachelor, worked as an ordinary worker in a huge construction company. He was a strong, muscular guy for his age, as he lifted heavy weights every day and went to work out at the local gym a couple of days a week. His best friend Mike was an auto mechanic and worked in his father's workshop. He does his job very well. Mike was invited to a Canada Day party on July 1st. Since he didn't want to take his girlfriend with him and didn't want to go alone, he convinced Steve to accompany him. Steve agreed, as he had nothing to do that evening. It was an ordinary backyard party. The courtyard has been turned into a dance floor. The music was loud and there was a lot of drinking. Steve sat quietly in the corner sipping a beer while Mike walked around chatting. A young girl with a bottle of beer in her hand staggered over to Steve and sprawled on a chair next to him. She drained the whole bottle in one gulp and belched. "I'm sorry," she said to Steve. "Slow down, young lady. You've got the whole evening ahead of you," Steve replied. "I'm celebrating." "We're all celebrating." "No, I'm celebrating," she stressed. "Okay, you're celebrating." Steve smiled. She's going to have hiccups soon, he thought. "Yes, I'm celebrating my breakup with my ex-boyfriend. He cheated on me." She got up and with some difficulty walked onto the dance floor and began to move her body to the beat of the music. Steve continued to sip his beer and noticed how two guys standing near the patio joined the girl and danced next to her. 10 minutes later, she left the dance floor and went to get a glass of whiskey. She turned to Steve and smiled. She raised her glass towards him and swallowed it all. He shook his head. Then she returned to the dance floor. The two guys were now dancing closer to her and almost touching her every time. "Hey dude, why are you just sitting here?" Mike asked. "Go and talk to people." He leaned closer to Steve's ear. "There are a lot of chicks around," he said softly, "and they're all excited." Steve turned towards the dance floor, but he couldn't see either the girl or the two guys. He jumped up from his chair. "What's going on?" Mike asked in surprise. "I'm going to get another beer," Steve answered. Steve looked around, but couldn't find her. He then walked towards the front of the house. Cars were parked in the driveway as well as on the street. 100 meters away in a dark spot, he could see someone kneeling in front of an open car door. He approached quietly, and what he saw infuriated him. She was lying in the back seat and one guy inside was holding her and trying to take off her t-shirt. The other guy who was outside was trying to pull off her jeans. She tried to resist, but she was too drunk. "Leave her alone and get out," Steve yelled. "Come on, man, if you don't like what you see, just leave," said the guy outside the car, walking up to Steve. "You can join the party if you want." Steve didn't hesitate. He kicked the guy hard between the legs. He screamed, grabbed his balls, and fell to his knees. Steve clenched his fist and punched the guy in the face with all his might. He could hear bones crunching. The guy lost consciousness. At the same time, another guy screamed and ran towards Steve. He was more muscular and taller. He tried to punch Steve in the face, who ducked and punched him in the stomach. The guy hit back and Steve fell to the ground. He grabbed Steve by the shirt and threw him against the car. Steve hit the front door painfully. He saw the guy raise his right leg, and Steve just dodged to the left when the guy kicked and broke the window in the car. Seeing the man's right leg raised, Steve fiercely kicked the left one. The guy lost control and fell. Steve jumped on his stomach and punched him in the face until he lost consciousness. Steve pulled up the young woman's jeans. She seemed a little lost and sleepy. He picked her up and led her to his car. He put her in the passenger seat and, after searching her pockets, found the key to the house, on the holder of which was written Eglinton Heights. Steve knew every corner of the city, as he worked on all major construction sites. He stepped on the gas and drove to this address. He parked in the visitor's parking lot. "What's your apartment number?" Steve asked, waking her up. Your apartment number?" Steve yelled. 412, she murmured. Steve put her hand on his shoulder and led her to the 4th floor, holding her in his arms. Once in her room, Steve put her on the bed and went to the bathroom. He found what he was looking for, a bucket. Then he went to the kitchen and dissolved a mixture of salt and sugar in a glass of water. He made her drink some of the mixture while holding a bucket next to her. Suddenly she started shaking and threw up in the bucket. Then Steve wiped her mouth and let her lie down. 15 minutes later, Steve repeated with the drink and she threw up again. After a couple of bouts of vomiting, Steve undressed her, took her to the bathroom and let cold water drench her. She was too weak to fight. Then Steve dried her off, put her to bed, and covered her with a blanket. Steve sat on a chair next to the bed and watched her sleep. It was early in the morning when she woke up a little anxious, staring at the ceiling as if trying to figure out what had happened last night. She was startled when she found Steve sitting across from her. She lifted the blanket and found that she was naked. "You raped me! Stop it!" she screamed. "Take it easy, girl." Steve stood up. "In fact, I stopped 2 guys from raping you." "To whom?" "2 guys. Why am I naked?" Then she noticed the bruises on Steve's knuckles and the redness on his face. "It's time for me to leave. I advise you to have a good rest and stay away from alcohol." Steve left the room. Like a dissipating fog, she recalled snatches of memories from last night. A party. She drank a lot. 2 guys dragged her to the car. There was a fight. The glass shattered. "He saved me!" She jumped out of bed, quickly put on jeans and a t-shirt, and ran out of the room. In the hallway, she heard the elevator door close. She ran down the stairs and out of the building. Too late, she only saw the young man driving away in his red Dodge Daytona. The following Saturday night, Steve and Mike were drinking beer at a local pub when Mike's cell phone rang. He listened to the caller and then turned to Steve. "Do you know Trisha?" Steve continued to drink his beer. "On the phone, some girl says she doesn't know your name, but she knows that you are my best friend. Is she calling to sell something?" "Miss, unfortunately, my friend does not know you. And if you are trying to sell something, we are not interested in it." Mike listened for a minute. "She said she was at a party last week and you brought her to her apartment." "Oh, is her name Trisha? I didn't ask." Steve picked up the phone. "Is there anything I should know?" Mike smiled. Steve shook his head. "Yes, Trisha, how can I help you this time?" "Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for what you did last time. Without you, I do not know where I would be right now and in what condition. I only did what I needed to do to help someone in danger. No, you did something that no one else would have done. You are my savior, my hero. Thanks. And from now on, you have to behave yourself. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "Yes, I understand. I've been a good girl since that party and I intend to stay that way." "Nice. By the way, how did you find out Mike's phone number?" "I went to the house where the party was and asked about you, but no one knew you. I gave your description and the car you drive, but still no one had a clue. The host of the party called me this morning saying you might be Mike's friend and he gave me his phone number." "Okay, Trisha, it was nice talking to you. I'm actually drinking beer with Mike. Are you free to have dinner together tomorrow?" Trisha cut him off. I just want to say thank you personally," Trisha added. "Of course. I'll get your number from this phone and call you tomorrow morning. And my name is Steve." They met on Sunday evening and had dinner at a posh restaurant. They avoided talking about what happened at the party. They talked about themselves and their work. Trisha worked as a data entry clerk in the corporate supply chain. After that, they went for a walk, and finally Steve took her to her house. "Thank you so much for this pleasant evening, Steve, my hero." Trisha kissed Steve on the cheek and got out of the car. He watched her walk to the main entrance of the building and then drive away. 2 weeks later, Steve called Trisha and invited her to a movie. They talked for a few minutes, and finally Trisha told him that she had been waiting for his call. "I've been waiting for yours too," Steve stammered. After the movie, Steve walked Trisha to her apartment after she invited him for coffee. In the small living room, Steve found a brochure on the table. It was from a tattoo parlor. "I was thinking about the tattoo on my lower back," Trisha said, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "You don't need a tattoo," Steve replied. "I've been thinking. I like your body the way it is." Steve cut her off. "Yes, you saw me naked." Steve walked up to her and kissed her gently on the lips. He broke the kiss and looked into her eyes. "One day I'm going to have to thank these 2 guys." Trisha threw herself into his arms and felt his bulge, which aroused her. Steve put his hand on her ass and held her close. He licked her ear, which made her feel amazing, then lowered himself to her neck. Then Steve picked her up in his arms and carried her to the bed. Then she came over and lay down next to him. He kissed her deeply, tasting his own juice. They dated for several months and decided to get married. They rented a 2-bedroom townhouse and made it their home. They were happy together. A year later, Steve met his high school friend Billy at the mall. Billy interviewed people and handed out his business cards. "Hi, Billy, it's been a while," Steve said. "Hi, Steve, the last time we talked, we were kids," Billy replied. "What are you doing?" Steve asked. "I changed my career. I was fired from my last job." "Am I sorry to hear that? I saw you handing out your business cards to people." I work as an insurance agent myself. What? I don't understand. I don't work for a financial company. I work on a commission basis, selling my products, life insurance, and investments. Oh, I understand. What about you? Married? Children? Billy asked. I work for a construction company. Yes, I am married. I have no children. And you? Married. Neither do you, and I don't have children, Billy replied. It was nice talking to you, Billy. I have to go. My wife is waiting for me. By the way, do you have life insurance? Are you protected? Have you thought about your wife if something happened to you, or about your children when you have them? The idea never crossed my mind, Steve replied. This is the biggest mistake that everyone makes. Here's my card. Talk to your wife and call me. It will be a pleasure for me to come to your house when both of you are present. That's what we usually do. It's called a kitchen table. I meet with both spouses at their place of residence, explain everything about protection and future goals, and answer any questions that arise. Okay, I'll call you soon. Steve put the card in his pocket. That night after dinner, Steve told Tricia about Billy and how it would be nice if they both listened to him about life insurance and protection. Tricia wasn't thrilled, as it would be an additional monthly expense. Let's hear what he has to offer, and then we'll decide, Steve told his wife. We can meet him here next week. The following week, Billy visited Steve and Tricia and explained to them the difference between urgent and full life insurance. He also advised them to start investing money for old age. In the end, Billy came with a package for joint emergency life insurance, according to their protection needs. The monthly premium will be low, as they are still very young. A couple of days later, Billy returned with the policies to close the deal. Before leaving, he asked them for some recommendations and gave Tricia his business card. 3 months later, Tricia called Steve at work. Hi, honey. I'm going to have to work overtime this week, and I'm going to finish around 8 o'clock today. Okay, no problem. I'll cook dinner and wait for you. Thank you. You're so sweet. After dinner, Tricia explained that the workload had increased recently and the company did not want to recruit more employees. She worked overtime 3 times that week. 2 weeks later, she had to work overtime again. Steve didn't argue and cooked dinner himself. 6 months later, Steve was sent to a construction site next to Tricia's work. Around noon, he decided to go and invite her to lunch. When he got to the office where she worked, he was told that she had just left for lunch. Outside, in the parking lot, he saw her car. She could walk to the nearest restaurant, Steve thought. Then he remembered that when they were dating, he once invited her to lunch, and they went to a small and cozy pizzeria 5 minutes away from her work. He rushed over there. Steve saw her walking to the pizzeria and tried to call her, but she couldn't hear over the noise of the traffic. When he entered the restaurant, he found Tricia and Billy sitting at a table. Hi, Steve, Billy said, trying to smile. Tricia turned around with a look of shock on her face, but quickly smiled. I came here for pizza and look who I met. Hi, Billy, Steve said, still a little confused. I'm done and I have to go. I have a meeting with potential clients in 15 minutes. Billy stood up and shook Steve's hand. It was nice to see you, Tricia. Billy came up to the counter and Steve felt that he was a little tense during the payment and had a serious conversation with the cashier. Twice, the latter raised his head to look at Steve and Tricia. I work nearby and decided to visit you and invite you to lunch, Steve told Tricia. You should have called me and I would have waited for you, darling. Billy walked past their table and raised his hand to say goodbye. Outside, he got into a brand new car. Wow, he's made a lot of progress in his new job. Steve looked at his friend running away. Let's order, okay? Tricia was a little nervous. Is something wrong, Tricia? Not at all. I only have 20 minutes left until the end of lunch, she replied. One Monday evening, when Tricia was working overtime, Steve wanted to work on their expenses and see how much money they could save in a month. It's high time to get your own house, he thought. They must have a sufficient amount as a down payment. Tricia was the only one who kept all the records of everything. She kept everything in the last drawer of her desk. He didn't want to wait for her and decided to get all the past bank statements and start working on them. He wrote down all the expenses, and after an hour, he had an idea what to cut and what to give up. He put all the documents back in his desk drawer and went to drink beer in the kitchen, analyzing the numbers in his head. Suddenly it dawned on him. He ran to get all the documents from the desk drawer again. He studied the receipts one by one. For more than a year, Tricia's salary has not changed. What about overtime pay? Steve thought about it. There's something wrong somewhere. She has been working overtime almost every 2 weeks for the past 6 months. Where's the money? Steve put the documents back in the drawer the way he found them. He opened a second can of beer. Either she's saving money for overtime work elsewhere or she's not working after hours, Steve thought. Later, Steve heard Trisha's car pull into the driveway. When she entered the house, Steve was sipping another can of beer. "Honey, you look tired," Steve said. "This job is going to kill me." "Why don't you find someone else who won't kill you?" "You know how hard it is to find a good job with good pay these days," she retorted. "When will you have your next overtime job?" "As usual, on Wednesday and Friday." "I'll heat up the food." Steve got up and went to the refrigerator. When they went to bed, Trisha immediately fell into a deep sleep. Steve stared at the ceiling and thought. The only question he asked himself was whether his wife was cheating on him. The next day, he called Mike, the only person he could trust. "Hi, Mike. I need to see you this afternoon." He had a serious voice. Mike knew his friend very well and felt that something was wrong. "Let's meet at the pub." On Wednesday evening, the two friends were sitting in Mike's car in front of Trisha's workplace. Her car was parked in the parking lot. They had been waiting for an hour. Finally, 3 women, including Trisha, left the building and each went to her car. "Let's wait and see if any man comes out," Steve asked. They waited 15 minutes and no one came out of the building. Steve sent Trisha a text message. "I went to buy a beer." When Steve returned home with a pack of beer, Trisha had already set the table. On Friday night, Mike was the only one spying on Trisha. He was in contact with Steve all the time. As before, she went straight home. That night, while Trisha was sleeping, Steve took her cell phone and looked through all the messages and phone calls. On Saturday, the two friends met again to discuss the next step. "I checked her cell phone and didn't find anything suspicious," Steve told Mike. "She probably deletes everything," Mike suggested. "Your words make sense." "You see, Steve, if you really want to know the truth, you're going to have to spy on her every day and all day. You don't have time for this and you're not a professional. So what? So you're going to have to hire a private investigator and it's going to cost you a lot." "Then what should I do?" Steve asked. "I have an idea, come with me." Mike took Steve to an electronics store and recommended that he buy 3 voice-activated voice recorders with long-life batteries. That afternoon, Steve discreetly hid one in the kitchen next to the home phone, one in the bedroom and one in Trisha's car under the passenger seat. "I'm tired." Steve pushed her hand away. "I've had a hard week." Trisha turned on her side and fell asleep. The next morning, like every Sunday, Steve went to the gym. He returned before noon and found a note from Trisha on the kitchen table. "I went shopping." Steve immediately checked the dictaphone in the kitchen. Apart from some domestic noise, there was nothing particularly interesting there. With what was in the bedroom, he could listen to Trisha's one-way phone conversation. "Hi, can we talk? I miss you too, darling." "Oh, he went to the gym. He'll be back by noon." "Yes, I'm excited about the upcoming Wednesday. Of course, I'll wear the black underwear that you gave me." She laughed. "You're right. That's the advantage of a flexible work schedule. Where are you taking me this time? You'll confirm it tomorrow, but don't take me to Motel 6 like last time. I didn't like it there." "Okay, I have to go. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you." Steve tried to digest what he had just heard. He was a cuckold. He didn't know who the guy who used Trisha was, but he knew he was married. He understood the reason why she wasn't being paid for overtime. They're going to make love on Wednesday, and the last time was at Motel 6. He ran into the bedroom and hid the recorder there. He rummaged through the drawers and finally found a pair of black bras and panties hidden among her clothes. He needed to know who this guy was and where they were going before deciding on a plan. He called Mike and told him what he had found. That evening, he played the tired husband again. He couldn't sleep. What if that asshole calls her at work? He wondered. On Monday morning, while Trisha was in the bathroom, Steve took the dictaphone from the kitchen and hid it at the bottom of her purse. "I hope this works," he thought. His thoughts had been on Trisha and her lover all day. He made all sorts of plans. In the worst-case scenario, he would have to take Mike's car and follow them on Wednesday. At home in the afternoon, as soon as Steve saw that Trisha was very busy in the kitchen, he went into the bedroom and took the recorder out of her bag. Then he took the car key from her and carefully walked over to get another recorder from under the seat. He decided to listen to the one from the car first, since the one in the bag had a recording clock. "I will listen to music from the computer. Let me know as soon as dinner is ready," he told Trisha. He turned on his headphones and could hear the morning commute to her work. For about 30 minutes, he listened to the sound of the engine and the radio. There was a silent pause. He heard the door open and close. Then Trisha's voice rang out. "Hi, dear. I'm sorry that I couldn't answer your call earlier. My boss was nearby, and I had a lot of things to do." "Where?" "Lake Simcoe." "Wow, a lake house with a private beach. It sounds amazing. This belongs to one of your clients. You're doing good business, Billy." Steve frowned and continued to listen. "Maybe one day I'll join you and sell insurance." "Yes, and investments too." "Yes, Billy, I promise you that this time you'll get my ass. I didn't let anyone touch her, not even Steve. And she will belong to you and only to you. As usual, I'll leave my car at the same place and go with you. I need to get back to work. Bye, honey." Now Steve knew who the lover was and where they were going to make love. He called Mike. After dinner, he told Trisha that he was going to meet Mike at the pub for a beer. "Don't be late," Trisha told her husband. In fact, both friends met in the parking lot. After Steve told Mike everything, Mike asked his friend about his plan. "I was thinking that they would both have a surprise on the way back, like 4 flat tires. They should have already planned the time when they would leave Lake Simcoe, so that Trisha would return home at about the same time as she usually arrived after work. That would put them both in a tense position. By the time she gets home, I'll be gone with all my stuff. I'll send a copy of the recording to Billy's wife and find a lawyer to divorce this fool. It's a good idea, but someone has to follow them to know where the car is and imperceptibly damage all the tire valves," Mike reminded Steve. "It's a complicated plan, I know, but I can't think of anything else." "What kind of car does he drive?" Mike asked. Steve told him. "Oh, that piece of shit," Mike exclaimed. "What do you mean?" Steve was puzzled. "You'll see, I bet this model will be recalled in a couple of months," he said. "Why?" Steve asked. "There is a problem with the suspension. Several bolts are constantly loosening and can cause serious damage to the car." Steve smiled. "You're not thinking, yes, that's what we need. Is there anything you can do to get them stuck in there?" Lake Simcoe is more than 100 miles from Toronto. With my experience, I can loosen the bolts a little bit, so after about 150 miles, everything starts to vibrate, and the asshole will have to stop and he won't understand what's going on. He'll have to call for a tow, but how can I do this job? "I have an idea." Steve smiled slyly. By the time Steve got home, Trisha was already sound asleep. He went to look for that asshole's business card. On Tuesday morning, Steve called Billy from work and asked him if he could come home in the evening, as he had some money to invest and would need his advice. Billy had an appointment with a client at 7 p.m., and he didn't want to postpone the meeting, but Steve insisted. Then Billy agreed to come at 9 p.m. Steve immediately sent Trisha a text message saying that Billy would be coming in the evening for investment advice. During lunch, Trisha called him. "Steve, we can barely save money every month. What will you invest in?" "Baby, I wanted to surprise you at home, but since you asked, I'm getting a significant raise for my next paycheck." "That's great." "We need to celebrate." Steve tried to be happy. "Yes, of course, we'll talk about it." "Am I still your hero?" "Of course it is." Lying fool, Steve thought as he hung up the phone. That evening at 9 p.m., Billy pulled into his driveway. Steve let him in, and Trisha greeted her lover with a big smile. Unbeknownst to the two of them, Steve turned off all the outside lights. Then the three of them sat down, and Billy began to explain about mutual funds and their benefits. At the same time, Mike, who was parked on the street, approached Billy's car with a professional lift. No one will notice him in the dark. He quickly lifted the car and climbed under it with a wrench and a piece of cloth. He knew which bolts needed to be loosened, and each time he covered them with a cloth so that there would be no traces left. Steve could feel them exchanging signals. They even touched each other's feet under the table. Steve pretended not to notice anything. Billy chose several funds and left a couple of pamphlets. Steve went to get 2 cans of beer and heard a whisper behind his back. At the same time, he received a message from Mike. "Everything is ready," he smiled. "Last time you told me where your wife works, but I forgot." Steve avoided Billy's eyes. "Jenny works at RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada in the city center. You both make a good couple. If I don't invest with you, I'll have to do it with your wife." All three of them laughed. After swallowing his beer, Steve told his friend that he would look through the brochures and consider his advice. He will call him in a few days and confirm everything. After Billy left, Steve opened a bottle of whiskey and filled a glass. "Won't you go get some wine, dear?" Steve asked Trisha. "You know I don't touch alcohol anymore," Trisha almost screamed. I know, I was just asking. And Steve, you know very well that you can't stand a mix of beer and whiskey. I'm celebrating, dear. Well, if you get drunk, you're sleeping on the couch tonight. Trisha turned and went upstairs to the bedroom. Steve pulled out a chair and sat down. He stared at the glass in front of him, but did not touch it. He was remembering what had just happened in front of his eyes between his wife and her lover. He knew his marriage was over. He sat there for an hour. Then he took the bottle and poured most of the whiskey into the sink, but left a small amount in the glass. Still standing at the kitchen sink, Steve rinsed his throat with the whiskey left in the glass. He entered the bedroom and found Trisha sleeping on her stomach. As usual, she slept in a long t-shirt and no panties, which she wore to sleep only during her period. Steve took off his clothes and found hand cream on the nightstand. Steve, what are you doing? It's okay, relax, baby. Trisha tried to move, but Steve's weight was pressing down on her. You stink, you're drunk, get off me. Steve kissed her hard on the neck and continued kissing her. No, Trisha shouted. Don't do this to me. I'm your husband, your hero. I have the right to give you a few hickeys. Please, honey, I'm tired. I have a hard day tomorrow. We can do it another time. A day with your lover, Steve thought furiously. He was furious. He grabbed Trisha by both hands and pulled them behind her back with one hand. No! Don't do this to me. You're welcome, Trisha pleaded. With one strong thrust, Steve was completely in her ass. Trisha felt her body being cut in two. She almost fainted from the sudden pain. She was crying. You're hurting me. Stop it now, she screamed. Stop screaming or it will hurt even more. Why? Why did you do this to me? With his wife? Trisha was crying, smearing tears on her face. Steve let her go to the bathroom. He could hear her crying. She's crying because her lover won't get a virgin ass anymore, Steve thought, and almost laughed. He went to the bathroom and joined Trisha under the running water. As soon as he entered, she jumped out. You hurt me, Trisha sobbed. Shh, Steve soothed her, hugging her. Don't touch me. She forcefully pulled his hand away from her. Steve turned her around and jumped on her, ripping off her t-shirt. You belong to me. I brand you with my property marks. Trisha looked confused, but she didn't say anything. You belong to me. Wednesday morning, when Steve entered the kitchen, Trisha was drinking coffee and was about to leave. She was wearing a scarf. Her eyes were red, and it was clear that she hadn't slept last night. She picked up her purse and headed for the door. Will you come back after work? Steve asked. Trisha stopped for a few seconds and then opened the door. I asked if you would come home after work. It's either yes or no. Trisha turned to him with a tear-stained face. You are my husband. This is our house. Where do you want me to go? Do you want to talk about last night? No, I'm late. Another time. She left the house. Steve watched her drive off in her car. She'd rather go and meet her lover than talk to her husband, he told himself. As soon as Steve got to work, Mike called him. Hi, Steve. I followed her like you told me to. She parked her car at the mall near her work and waited for the guy. Once he was there, she got into his car and they drove north. Thank you, Mike. I'll let you know what happened between Trisha and me. Why are you so quiet? Your thoughts are somewhere far away. Aren't you excited? Billy seemed worried as they drove along the highway. This is Steve. What about him? He was very aggressive in bed last night. He's never been like this before. What do you mean by aggressiveness? He said things like I belong to him and he owns me. He even hurt me. Trisha took off her scarf. Oh shit! And it's all over my body. He put his marks on me, according to him. This morning when I was leaving, he asked me if I would come home after work. Does he suspect something? Does he know anything? I don't know. We were very careful. Maybe he feels rejected. Maybe subconsciously I didn't give him what he expected from me. Don't blame yourself, Trisha. But he doesn't deserve it. I'm cheating on him with his friend. He's the one you love. I know, but he won't understand. Do you want to go back? No, I just want to relax, but we're not going to make love. I'm still in pain. I hope you understand. No problem. Thank you, Billy. They should be at or near their destination by now. Steve glanced at his watch. Will she give Billy her body after what she went through last night? He doubted it. He glanced at his watch from time to time and couldn't get rid of the thought that Billy was using Trisha in all poses. I can't wait until noon, he told himself. Suddenly, a devious smile appeared on his face. He asked his boss for a long coffee break, as he had to make some important personal calls. Billy parked in front of the cottage, and Tricia immediately got out of the car and walked to the lake. It's beautiful and peaceful here. Tricia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I finally see a smile on your face. Billy smiled. Come here and hug me. They didn't break away from each other for a while, and then Billy suggested they take a walk along the beach. As they were walking hand in hand, Tricia's phone rang. She looked at the incoming phone number and did not answer the call. Billy asked her. She nodded. Less than a minute later, the phone rang again, and this time Tricia postponed the conversation and turned off the phone. He was in his car. He dialed another number. Mike, I need another favor from you, buddy. And if he calls you at work? Billy asked. I hadn't thought of that, Tricia said, frowning. I'll tell him I took the day off after what he did to me last night. At the same time, Billy's phone rang. I don't recognize this number, he told Tricia. Don't take it, she advised. It could be someone from the main office looking for me or a potential client. I have to answer. He clicked on the green phone icon. He didn't have time to say hello to the caller before he heard a man's voice. Tell that cheating Tricia to answer her husband's call. And the guy on the other end of the line hung up. Billy stood as still as a statue, still holding the phone to his ear. What happened? Who was it? Tricia seemed very worried. It was a man, Billy muttered, whose voice I didn't recognize. What did he say? Tricia took him by the shoulders and shook him. So I can tell you to take Steve's call. Oh my God, he knows. He knows everything. Tricia trembled with horror. We need to turn on your phone. He hurried back to the car and Tricia followed him. She turned on her mobile phone and at the same moment it rang. Is that him? Billy asked with a worried look. Answer me. Steve, please. It's not what you think. Let me explain, Tricia was crying. There's nothing to explain, Steve shouted over the phone. Billy could hear him. I've known everything for weeks now. What do you do in your free time? All about your day off for the meeting. You're probably wearing the black underwear he bought for you. Please, Steve, listen to me. Shut up. I'm throwing all your stuff out of the house and I'm meeting with a lawyer today with all my evidence. I'm begging you, Steve, let's meet and talk. What should I talk about? Don't you understand? It's over between us. Tricia started crying. I had a private investigator following you, Steve lied. Your bed session at Motel 6 was recorded and I have various copies on DVD. Tricia looked at Billy with horrified eyes. I love you, Steve. Don't throw me out of your life, please. Bullshit, Tricia. Is that your definition of love? I'm sorry, Steve. Give me one more chance, please. Forgive me? Forgive me? I've already given you a chance. I've made it clear that there are big problems in our relationship, but you left anyway to meet your lover. Now tell this asshole that I've made some phone calls and I know the branch where his wife Jenny works. I'm going there right now with a copy of the DVD. He'd better meet me at the bank entrance in 40 minutes. In 40 minutes and not a second more. Steve hung up and turned off his cell phone. Steve knew that when people panic, they don't think clearly. Billy was completely confused when Tricia told him what Steve was going to do. Get in the car quickly, he shouted to Tricia. Try to contact him and convince him not to date Jenny. He turned off his phone. Tricia sobbed. Try calling that guy. Billy pressed the call back button and handed Tricia his phone. Tricia looked at the phone number. This is Mike, his best friend. But Mike didn't pick up the phone. I'll call him from my phone, Tricia offered. Damn it! He turned off his phone too. Billy was driving at 100 kilometers per h. You won't get there in 40 minutes, Billy. I have to. I don't want him to destroy what I have. Tricia looked at him in shock. Why don't you call Jenny? I can't put her under stress. She is 8 months pregnant. Damn it. Can you cheat on her during pregnancy, but are you afraid to call? They were on the highway and Billy was now driving at over 150 kilometers per h. Who does he think he is, your weak husband? Billy gripped the steering wheel angrily. He's not a weakling, Billy. He's just a piece of shit who can't satisfy his wife. It was like a dagger thrust into her flesh. He's the best man I've ever known. Really? That's why you spread your legs in front of me. Billy, shut up. Tricia was annoyed. Don't tell me I'm the only one you've cheated on. You're a real ass. If only I knew. Did you know what? Billy cut her off. If it wasn't me, it would have been with someone else. I regret that I called you back the first time. Tricia was shaking her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Billy was driving at almost 200 kilometers per h, changing lanes from time to time to avoid oncoming and passing cars. I sincerely hope that nothing will work out between us, and Steve will give the DVD to your wife, who cannot satisfy her husband. Shut up, Billy yelled. I'm sure I'm not the first person you've cheated on, asshole. If you keep going, I'll stop and throw you out of the car. At the same time, there was a sudden vibration throughout the car. Trisha and Billy looked at each other in horror. He hit the brake and tried to pull the car to the curb, but the car did not obey. He hit the guardrail and the car overturned. Both passengers screamed and the airbags went off. The car flew towards the tree and crashed into it with a fatal blow, while the branch shattered the windshield, pierced the airbags, and penetrated Billy's throat. The branch damaged Trisha's head, ribs, upper body, and her right eye. The car was crushed to such an extent that it took firefighters several hours to knock out the doors. In the afternoon, Steve got a call from the police. He was told that his wife had been injured in a car accident and was at South Lake Hospital in Newmarket, a city north of Toronto. He acted like a shocked husband. He asked a few questions, but was told that the police were still working on the cause of the accident and that he had to come to the hospital. He immediately went to Mike and explained what had happened. Mike was not happy with the result and began to panic. What if the police discover that someone has loosened some bolts? Mike asked. They won't find out, and you've taken all the necessary precautions. There is nothing that could connect us to the car. We should just sit quietly. You knew what was going to happen when you made me call this guy this morning. I guessed it. You're just a murderer, Mike shouted. I did what a man should do. What now? You're taking me to Newmarket. I don't want the police to catch my husband in a state of stress driving alone. And most importantly, I have to play my part. An hour later, the nurse showed Steve into the waiting room. A couple of minutes later, 2 policemen came and sat down next to him. Do you know Billy Wilson? Policeman no, one asked. Yes, he is my school friend as well as our financial advisor. Steve replied calmly. Is he on good terms with your wife? Policeman no, 2 asked. I don't understand what you mean. I mean, is there anything besides friendship? I still don't understand you, officer. Steve frowned. Did you know that they were both having an affair? Policeman no, 1 asked. No, it can't be. Trisha won't cheat on me. She would never do that. Steve stood up. I need to see her. I need to see my wife. Where is she? Your wife is currently in intensive care. I was only told that she was injured in an accident. What happened? Why is she in intensive care? She was with Billy Wilson when his car crashed on the highway. According to an eyewitness, he was driving at extremely high speed towards Toronto. He died on the spot, and your wife is seriously injured. When firefighters pulled her from the wreckage, she uttered only these few words before falling unconscious. Tell Steve that I'm sorry. Let him forgive me. Steve burst into tears. The doctor would like to meet you. The nurse showed Steve the hallway. The 3rd door on your right. Steve headed in the indicated direction. I'm Dr. Martino. I'm sorry about your wife's accident. Please have a seat. Steve wiped his eyes. They're giving her a strong sedative to reduce the pain, the doctor continued. What I'm about to say is not good at all. You will have to be strong. Steve looked into the doctor's eyes, waiting for him to continue. She lost her left leg and her right eye. Her ribs are broken, her internal organs are damaged. She had a severe blow to the head. I am very sorry, but there is no hope of recovery. Steve bent down to look at the floor, shaking his head. She's on life support. You will have to make a decision. Only you, the doctor added. When can I talk to her? Steve asked, his voice breaking. She can't see and she can't speak, but she can hear. At the same time, a nurse entered the office and handed a document to the doctor. He looked through it and signed on different pages. Then he gave it to Steve. Please review it and see if all the information is correct, and when you decide, you will write your name and sign the pages above the dotted line next to my signature. Here's a pen for you. He gave Steve a pen. Steve entered the room and found Trisha lying broken in bed. It was wired to various machines and monitors. He sat down next to her. It's me, Steve. Trisha struggled to reach out to Steve. I won't touch you. You're dirty, and you're in a very bad way. You're reaping what you've sown, Trisha. If you hadn't spread your legs in front of Billy, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. Tears were streaming down her face. By the way, he died as a result of your accident. A jagged figure suddenly appeared on the monitor. I fought for you, Trisha. I took punches to protect you. I put my life in danger for you. You thought I was your hero, and that's my reward, making love to someone else behind my back. Trisha tried to open her mouth to speak, but couldn't. If you didn't love me anymore, you should have told me. I would have let you go, but you chose to lie to me, to play with my feelings, to give me a few careless seconds. Thank God we don't have children, and you want me to forgive you. How can I? Steve furiously took the document and signed it where it was necessary. That bastard came to my house to sell life insurance and stole my wife. Trisha gasped for air. I'm going to unplug the plug. It's better for you. Steve gritted his teeth. Once again, I will never forgive you. Burn in hell. Steve stood up and approached her ear. I wrecked his car last night, and I'm going to cash out your life insurance policy soon, he whispered. The monitors went crazy and an alarm sounded. Dr. Martino and 2 nurses burst into the room. Steve handed the doctor the documents and nodded at him. He left the room,